Andrew Lownie, author of Entitled, the book that started all of the latest downfall for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who also writes the Substack, The Lownie Report, joins me once again on Outspoken. And Andrew, well, since you were last here, obviously so much has changed. We keep closely across your daily developments on Substack. But I guess the big question now, Andrew, is do you think the monarchy can recover from this? And is Charles really doing enough as king?
Yes, I think it can recover, but depends what it does. And I don't think Charles is doing enough. I think the problem for him is that he's saying that the law must follow its course and the royal household will cooperate fully with any inquiry. But the problem is the royal household has been shutting down this study for the last 15 years. And so they're in a slightly difficult position. I hope that they are encouraging all the PPOs to speak. But I think the danger is that people will and provide all the internal reports when there were complaints made. But the danger is that that will reveal that the palace has known about this problem for years, which I've had confirmed to me by multiple sources, and kind of pushed it under the carpet. And they've been caught because they never expected these Epstein leaks and they thought they might get away with it. So it's, this is a case of perverting the course of justice. I mean, they knew about some of the financial shenanigans. They knew about the girls going into Buckingham Palace, the escorts, etc. And they didn't do anything about it. And they've had 15 years to sort out this problem. So it's a crisis of their own making. I think the line is that they will create firewalls around Charles, and the line will be he never knew, and some poor flunky will take the blame. But we do know that he was involved in the settlement. All my sources say he contributed money. He would certainly have discussed it with other senior members of the royal family. And so he's in quite a difficult position, I think. And they're hoping in some ways that this problem will go away if they just keep quiet.
Yeah, and that I think is totally naive. It is not a strategy that I agree with at all, because it's failed time and again when it comes to this story. And so there are a couple of things to break down. I think the payoff, the hush money, is a massive issue for King Charles, because it is one of those key scenarios where William and Catherine have their hands totally clean. And indeed, he can argue, the future king can argue, that behind the scenes at the time of the payoff, he was actually advocating for Andrew to be banished altogether. Whereas for Charles, he was running the monarchy, effectively. I'm not liking these attempts by Buckingham Palace now to throw Queen Elizabeth II under the bus when Charles was effectively running the show. She was suffering from terminal cancer, as we now know. And the payoff not only, I believe, was approved by him, it was engineered by the palace in order to allow the Platinum Jubilee to go smoothly, which looks naive now, but at the time was incredibly important. But also included some of his own money. Now, The Sun says £1.5 million. How can he get around that?
Well, I think that's his problem. They put out that denial, a rather half-hearted denial, but I know the Sun are standing by their sources. Certainly my sources suggested he put money in. But I think even if he didn't put money in, he was involved in discussions. You're absolutely right. There was a sort of co-monarchy going on for the last few years of the Queen's reign. He's been there for the last 3.5 years. So he can hardly say that he knew nothing about this. I mean, I detail in the book how the press came to the palace with numerous stories, denied, or there were legal threats, or they were pressure put on them saying, if you do this, we'll withdraw access to members of the royal family. And we have the famous case of ABC Television and Amy Robach, who claimed that she had this interview with Virginia Giuffre saying all sorts of things about Andrew, and the palace, basically ABC kowtowed to the palace. But, in the book, again, lots and lots of stories of people going to the Queen or her private secretary and saying, Andrew's been caught taking bribes in Kazakhstan, or there have been complaints in the Foreign Office about his behavior. And nothing was ever done. And there were countless examples through this 15-year period of, for example, the Selman Turk High Court case, where, over £1 million was found to have been given to the Yorks without them being able to explain where it came from. There was Fergie in 2010 caught selling access to Andrew on the News of the World tape. Why wasn't anything done at that stage? There have been countless opportunities for them to address this problem, and yet they've done nothing. People have made a lot of a 2019 email showing that Charles saw this from David Rowlands. But the press have been reporting how the Rowlands have been boasting of being the royal family's financial advisors. Those stories go back, I think, at least a dozen, if not longer, years.
But based on all of your reporting, Andrew, on this, which has obviously been thorough and in-depth and lasted for many years, you agree with the contention that William's hands are clean in this. He was not involved in the Andrew cover-up, and indeed, he did want his father, and let's be fair, his grandmother, to go further in terms of the punishment of Andrew, putting him effectively in royal purgatory.
Yes, certainly I've not come across William having any connection with Epstein, apart from some money to the Arthur Shot Prize, which came out the other day. And everything I've heard is that William has been pushing to deal with this problem for years. He doesn't like Andrew on a personal level. He can see the reputational damage. And he thinks his father has been weak. They allowed Fergie and Andrew to come back within the royal fold. Prince Philip had got the measure of Fergie. And Charles seems to have sort of bent to the manipulation of Fergie. And there he was kissing her hand at Ascot and having her to the royal box at Wimbledon. Extraordinary, given what they knew about their behavior and the potential embarrassment down the line. But I think the feeling, I'm seeing it again with the daughters. The daughters are deeply involved in this story. And again, with the Selman Turk case, money was passed through their accounts. We've seen it with Tara Katouni, another business associate, giving Beatrice giving her jewelry. We know the girls were basically subsidizing the parents. Fergie was living off her daughters. We know the daughters were taking on these trips as a trade envoy at huge public cost in order to build a nice filofax of contacts, which they're now using. So, and then there's Charles saying, we mustn't blame the sins of the parents on the daughters. Well, the daughters are deeply involved, and it was very interesting to see them very publicly distancing themselves from the daughters this week by saying they wouldn't be invited to Ascot. Why not just quietly have a word and say, look, we prefer you not to turn up? Why make such a big show of it? For the simple reason that they want to distance themselves from the scandals, which I think inevitably will come out.
Indeed, and I actually want to come to those scandals involving Fergie and Beatrice and Eugenie shortly, because they are a serious part of this story. But Andrew, what a lot of people are trying to work out at the moment is when it comes to the Epstein files and when it comes to your book, how much is conjecture and how much, especially of the sexual revelations, can be taken seriously. So I point, for example, to this police report in 2020 that suggests that at least one woman claimed that she was tortured at Frogmore Cottage using electric shock treatment, which she claims was instigated by Ghislaine Maxwell, but recounts seeing Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's face. And you have also reported in regards to potential dead bodies being buried on royal estates. So let's go through some of these examples. That Epstein files revelation, which a lot of people are taking seriously, have you been able to independently verify at all whether this accuser, because I do describe these women as accusers rather than victims until their cases are proven, is at all legitimate? Because if something like that had gone down on a royal estate, things become a lot harder for the royal family to get over, surely.
Yeah, I don't think I've said the dead bodies on the royal estate. The Surrey case, and I understand Surrey police are investigating it, is new to me. That was in the recent Epstein links. I certainly had, over the last 4 or 5 years, lots of stories from people claiming all sorts of satanic abuse, etc. And I ignored them because they seemed to be pretty wild and very difficult to verify. But funnily enough, when you now see these things in the Epstein file and releases, you begin to think, well, maybe there was something there. Now, I haven't had time to go back and talk to some of these sources again and get more detail. I kind of dismissed them. Um, there are stories, I think, of a woman dying in rough sex, I think at the Zorro Ranch. I think that's what I may have referred to, and I think possibly or possibly buried on a golf course next to, I think, one of Epstein's properties. I think that's what I saw, but that I haven't researched myself. I haven't seen any evidence to support that beyond what's in the leaks so far.
Okay, so in terms of royal involvement in Epstein's sex trafficking, as far as you are aware, it is limited to Andrew taking these women back to both Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. As far as you're aware, that's where it ends.
No, I mean there were women taken into to Royal Lodge, sent to Royal Lodge. There were women I know trafficked to him in places like Kazakhstan. And I think he was pretty aware of it. I mean, it's very clear that when he met Virginia Giuffre, it was Virginia Giuffre confirmed this to one of my sources, that basically he had ordered her. He decided he liked the look of her, and so Epstein provided her. So that wasn't a sort of chance meeting. And I think that was going on. I understand that the book was kind of passed around and people could sort of take their pick, like ordering a pizza. But we do know there were several women. I mean, the press reported this, who were sent to Andrew at various places. I think there's a story also of Sandringham. So I think let's see what comes out from the police investigation. But I think it's clear that there were a lot of women who were supplied to Andrew and to others by Epstein and Ghislaine. And this has been going on. Ghislaine was doing it for Andrew way back in London in 2000.
Do you think the palaces, though, could have been involved in the cover-up? Because, again, that's where things get very difficult for the institution.
Yes, well, I mean, I think they did know. I mean, just from my research on Traitor King, it's clear that the PPOs do report back to the head of royal security, but also to the Queen's or the monarch's private secretary. I know that from talking to my MI6 sources that reports were sent back. I talked to an FBI source who had actually briefed members of the royal family about what was, for example, in Virginia Giuffre's book, including William, way back before Virginia Giuffre died. So, I mean, they had, of course, lots of sources of information. And you've got to remember the number of intelligence people who are in the palace. Christopher Geidt was former intelligence corps. Parker was former head of MI5. They traditionally have an equerry from MI6. So there were plenty of sources of information. But certainly my MI6 people said that they took stories there and they were basically sent away with a flea in their ear.
Yeah, because this is the issue, isn't it? I mean, I just think back to 2011 when I was working in a senior position at News of the World, the now departed newspaper. And of course, we ran these pictures of Epstein and Andrew in Central Park. And a week later, the Mail on Sunday followed up the journalism with the now infamous picture of Virginia Giuffre with her arm around Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell. And that iconic picture, Andrew, and for 15 years, the British police, despite a host of allegations, decided that the evidence never reached the bar of even needing to open an investigation whatsoever. When I know from bitter and brutal personal experience that if you are someone high profile in the public eye and someone makes a complaint about you and it is spurious, the police still do investigate just to cover themselves. And so I feel like the 15 years of cover-up with the police is actually one of the reasons this is now so bad for the royal family. But is your contention that the police were potentially operating almost in cahoots with the palace, and then this actually becomes a real British deep state cover-up of these crimes?
Absolutely. It's the palace, the government, and the police. I put an FOI request, and the police wouldn't even say whether they had conducted an investigation or not. But I understand from my sources that Peter Loughborough, who was the head of Royal Security, was instrumental in trying to shut the story down. And Yes, I mean they all worked together. I mean they knew what was going on and they just tried to suppress it. So I don't think, certainly from my research, there's any doubt about that.
And now there are 10 police investigations, which proves that the evidence did always at least meet the threshold for an investigation to be launched. Because, see, look, the problem for me here, Andrew, is lots of people say, and I do understand it, this is turning into a media witch hunt. People want Andrew's head on a stake. There needs to be due process. He's innocent of all crimes. He needs to go through the justice system, all of that. You know, that's what King Charles himself said in the statement. And I'm really big on that. Like, one of my real philosophies is that I hate media witch hunts, and I absolutely believe that there does have to be due process, and we live in a two-tier system. But why I think there is an exception in this case is that if it wasn't for organizations like the News of the World, independent journalists like you writing Entitled, this story would never have been investigated at all, because the British deep state and the royal family was so desperate to cover it up.
Absolutely, that's absolutely the case. I mean, people like Di Davis, the former head of Royal Security, have been calling for investigations for years. I know, talking to one of my FBI sources, that material was passed to the Met in 2022, that for some, enough evidence that they should have pursued an inquiry. So absolutely, and I've been saying this is a much bigger scandal than people realize. I mean, and it's about a cover-up, and it's about institutional cover-up. I mean, it's true also of the way the government covered for Andrew as a trade envoy. We saw that in the debate last week. People are now beginning to appear. A lot of people who wouldn't talk to me are now quite vociferous in their criticisms of Andrew, and said that everyone knew about it, but nothing was done. He was allowed to continue as a trade envoy for another 10 years. These reports came in from people like Sir Patrick Nixon right at the beginning. But also, they then allowed him to do Pitch at the Palace, which was meant to be a charity, but which turned out to be basically a money-making operation for him. And they allowed him also to go off on trade trips after he'd been sacked as the trade envoy. So the government, I think, have some responsibility here, which is why I think there needs to be a parliamentary investigation into the trade envoy years, with people who wouldn't talk to me, ex-ambassadors in Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, the former heads of UKTI, people like Sir Andrew Khan and Stephen Brown have never spoken, but they know where all the bodies are buried. And I think, they need to be there on oath explaining how this was allowed to happen. We've had the story of Andrew putting massages on the taxpayer's bill. I mean, there was an awful lot of that going on, and expenses being lost in general accounting. So it is a much bigger problem, and that's why everyone is kind of nervous about how to proceed.
Well, yeah, because I begin to wonder if I was misled, because what I'm thinking about is those weeks and months before the late Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee, where many of us were, I think, rightly concerned about those celebrations, those very important historic celebrations, being completely overshadowed by a civil lawsuit in the US. And so what I was briefed for a very long time by sources close to the royal family is that there's no truth to these rumors, that the late Queen absolutely believes in her son's innocence. But the reason that we have to shut this down, the reason that there has to be a payoff, is because it would just be a sideshow which would completely overshadow all of her amazing work in this important year, which they knew was going to be her last moment ever on the Buckingham Palace balcony. But now, given the release of the Epstein files, we know that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor lied time and time again in that BBC Newsnight interview about the extent of his relationship with Epstein. Do you think the royal family knew that Andrew was lying, and that's the reason that they were so prepared to pay for the hush money, or pay the hush money to Giuffre?
Yes, I don't think they can claim that they nothing to do with me, Gov. It's all news to me. I think they had good sources. They knew what was going on. They must have seen the bad publicity in the papers, and there must have been people who investigated it and said, "Is there any truth in these stories?" what is your relationship with David Rowlands, who claims to represent the royal family? What are you doing mixing with Harvey Weinstein and Epstein? The Queen was giving him fresh honors after each Epstein allegation. She made him a Knight of the Garter, I think a Vice Admiral in the Navy. It was two fingers to everyone, saying basically we can do what we want. And because of the deferential society we used to live in, I think it's less so now, everyone sort of fell into line. This happened time and time again as I looked at the story of his career. Happened to the Navy. He was made best pilot when he was a pretty average pilot. And his colleagues were so appalled because they knew who should have won the prize. But it was decided by top brass that the Queen's second son should be the winner. Same with his Green Beret with the Royal Marines. He didn't do the proper course, but the Royal Marines felt that it would be useful to have a friend at court, keep Prince Philip on side, etc. So this of course gave him the sense that he was invincible and an extraordinary human being who could do anything.
But Andrew, ever since the release of Entitled, you have been so ahead of the game on this one. I mean, you were saying, no, Andrew is going to end up in prison. And lots of us who had seen this cover up for so many years thought, oh no, there's just no way that they're going to find another way to protect this guy. Now he has been arrested on the allegations of misconduct in public office, not the sex trafficking claims. Do you still believe that? Or do you think this is actually a way, because misconduct in public office is incredibly hard to charge and convict on. Is this a way to almost say, oh, look, he went through the process, we arrested him, but there's just not the evidence here, so we're not going to charge him?
Yes, I think that's a very likely scenario. I mean, an attempt to do that. They're already floating the story that because he hit the terms of reference of his appointment were such that he can't really be a public official. And of course, the advantage of all this is it makes it sub judice. It makes it much more difficult to report on it. I still think that he deserves to go to prison. I think that's what I've always said. Whether he goes to prison, I think, depends on a whole series of factors. If they charge Mandelson and get a conviction, then it's going to be very difficult not to pursue something with Andrew because the crimes are very, very similar. I think there's a very strong case here for treason. He was giving away diplomatic and political secrets. And I've been talking about this actually being a national security scandal. I've been talking about the American intelligence report that I've seen saying that he was a willing participant with criminal gangs who were linked to Russian intelligence. And that's certainly been confirmed to me by a number of my sources. I was interested to see Tim Chipman, the political editor of The Spectator, was also from his sources writing about this. And I think that's where the story will now go. And treason clearly is a very serious offence. I think the case there is pretty clear cut. But the material in the Epstein leaks, again, is pretty clear cut. He was receiving commercially sensitive information. He was passing it on to people who he shouldn't have passed it on to. He must have been aware. He would have been briefed about the security considerations. So I think there is a strong case there. The sex trafficking, again, difficult to convict. We've got to find the victims, get them prepared to testify. But I do think that there will be women that come forward, and there may well be a case for that to be presented. We've also got the Companies Act. I think he may have broken the law there. We have a possible American investigation because clearly some of this stuff happened in America. And we have HMRC who could also be looking at him for various things. I mean, there's, I think, a case also for fraud for both of them. And who knows what's in some of this material that hasn't got into the public domain. So I think there will be a public outcry if, after all the evidence that we see, nothing really happens and he doesn't bite isn't charged. I think the royal family clearly want to shut the story down in the same way they did with the Burrell case. The last thing they want is this dirty laundry washed in public. And I'm sure there are lots of things going on behind the scenes. But, there is so much public anger at the way that he has been protected that I think they are going to somehow have to sacrifice him and do it in a way that protects the king, because the king could go down with him too. I can see Andrew saying, well, why am I taking the rap for this? You all knew about it and you didn't seem to mind.
Yeah, I mean, you know this man. Does he have an honourable bone in his body? Would he allow himself to be sacrificed in order to save his brother's time on the throne? Or do you think he would throw Charles under the bus too?
I think he'd throw Charles under the bus, and if he doesn't, Fergie will do it. There's no love lost between any of them. And this is the pressure they've been able to put on Charles, because that's one of the reasons he's been kept in the tent, or both of them kept in the tent. But I'm sure that both of them, I know, I mean, from one of the intelligence reports I've seen, Andrew dislikes Charles intensely. One of my sources was telling me that Fergie and Andrew were sort of plotting to see how they could get back at Charles. This was a couple of weeks ago. So, I don't think he's going to do the honourable thing. He's going to do whatever it takes to save his skin. And I think that Fergie may well do the same, not just to dish the dirt on Charles, but also to dish the dirt on her husband if that gets her off a prison sentence.
So you think Fergie would want revenge against Charles?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, she calls herself a fighter. She's a survivor, and she'll do anything to survive. I mean, she claims not to have much money. I think she does have money. I mean, there's that £4 million house sold on behalf of the children only a few months ago. But there's money over the years. She's got some rich mentors still. But yeah, I think she is motivated by revenge. And I'm sure, I know a particular writer that she's talking to about doing a book. And she'll say all sorts of weird things about her relationship with Diana and the Queen. She'll put some little digs in at William and Charles, Philip. This is her moment to get her revenge. And it may be through a third party, an Obed Scopy, a sort of Andrew Morton type figure, or it may be more directly.
The video revolves around Andrew Lownie, a well-known biographer who has written extensively about Prince Andrew and the British royal family. According to the video, Lownie has revealed that Fergie and Prince Andrew are actively trying to undermine or harm King Charles in some way. The video frames this as a deliberate plot of revenge, implying a deep family conflict. Andrew Lownie is an author and researcher who has written several books about the royals, often focusing on Prince Andrew and controversial topics. While he does conduct research and interviews, it's important to remember that his work is sometimes interpreted through a dramatic lens by media outlets. His claims may reflect his investigative findings, but they are not automatically verified by independent sources. The British royal family is known for internal tensions, especially around public image, influence, and inheritance. Fergie, for example, has had a complex relationship with both the royal family and the media, and Prince Andrew has been involved in numerous public controversies. These family disputes, while real, are often exaggerated in headlines and videos to make them seem more dramatic or nefarious than they are. Here's what we actually know. There is no verified evidence that Fergie or Prince Andrew are plotting to destroy King Charles. What exists are claims and interpretations from Andrew Lownie's research and reporting, which the media and YouTube channels often amplify. In other words, the story mixes documented facts, insider anecdotes, and speculative interpretation, making it look more scandalous than confirmed. The video uses highly charged words like revenge, destroy, and plot to provoke a strong emotional reaction from viewers. This is a common technique in tabloid-style content. It grabs attention and encourages clicks, but it does not mean that the events are literally happening as described. Sensational language can distort perception, even if there's a kernel of truth in minor disagreements or tensions. Royal family content is naturally polarizing. Any story suggesting betrayal, revenge, or scandal tends to go viral quickly. Channels and tabloids often take minor conflicts, statements, or leaked anecdotes and frame them as explosive claims. This is why a story based on Andrew Lownie's research can appear far more dramatic in a video than it might in reality. When watching videos like this, it's important to ask, who is the source? Are the claims independently verified? Is the language sensationalized? Small disagreements or controversial statements do not automatically indicate a literal plot. Understanding context is key to separating genuine reporting from exaggerated storytelling. In conclusion, this video appears to be largely speculative and dramatic, using Andrew Lownie's research as a springboard to create a sensational narrative. There is no verified evidence that Fergie or Prince Andrew are plotting against King Charles. As always, it's important to consider the source, check for confirmation from reputable outlets, and be cautious about taking sensational claims at face value. What do you think? Do these claims seem plausible or more like media exaggeration? Share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe for more in-depth royal family breakdowns.